Chapter 44 A Family's Farewell. When last met, the menagerie entered the unlit cave to the west of Cibala. Signs of habitation popped up as they descended, with a disembodied voice ushering them deeper into the cave. Eventually, this voice led them to a moss-filled opening. Ever curious and fascinated with the growth, Kino decided to munch on the moss, finding it wholly repulsive only after swallowing. Worse yet, the voice startled a nearby cave fisher that instinctively defended itself from the party. It didn't want to fight, so after brief physical persuasion, it darted off into the dark, where the party decided not to follow. Wanting to help Kino, the party rested shortly after the encounter and investigated the moss. Leste was able to scrounge up some supplies and flush the moss out of Kino's system, while Maka and Sonora discovered that the moss had magical dampening capabilities. Perkring was all too excited to learn this, and he modified a set of manacles he had, coating it in the moss in hopes that it could come in handy later. Exploring deeper into the cave, the voice lulled the party towards an opening. Perkring got suspicious and used his magic to detect the thoughts of those around him. Immediately, he felt a presence of anxiety behind a wall and informed Leste. Atop Kaun, the two dashed into the wall, revealing an illusory barrier hiding the three Kenku. The menagerie beat them into submission, but the birds dared not tell who was organizing this group, or what they were doing out of fear. With the new path clear, these three were knocked unconscious, then bound to the manacles found in a nearby room. Continuing on, the party finally stumbled into a reasonable living space, but any deeper was blocked off by a magical barrier. Cautiously, they investigated, but quickly found that no one was present. Casually exploring now, they looked around the room for any clues of why the abductions were happening, and how to disable the barrier blocking the path ahead. On a desk littered with books, the party found three important pieces of information. The first was a ledger of people, describing in short detail the personalities of each person they seemingly abducted. Their ledger lined up horrifyingly well with the leads the party was given, but more concerningly, the ledger went back further than anyone feared. The second piece of information was a document listing the names of those who worked for this organization, and where they were patrolling. Finally, the party agreed it was unlikely that this underground group was the Yazoo. While this gang had been careful in hiding themselves, the Yazoo up to this point have been leaving no records of themselves, even in their hideouts. For that to change now was unlikely. As for taking down the barrier blocking their path, exploring the living quarters nearby revealed a false wall behind a set of bookshelves. It was a tight squeeze through the passage, but there they found a rune which, when pressed, deactivated the barrier. Alongside the rune was a modest hoard of knickknacks that these Kenkus cherished, which the party saw no reason in letting these monsters keep. Pressing on forward, an unsettling hold center lay just past the now dormant barrier. Personal trinkets of their victims were displayed on the walls like trophies, alongside a well-used set of manacles. With even more motivation to put an end to this, the party pushed on further into a wide and empty cave formation. The cave network was sprawling, so naturally the party split up to cover more ground. This plan quickly went awry, as Leste and Kaun split off and were put under a hypnotic spell from someone out of sight. The two of them couldn't move, react, or even recognize the danger that they were in. All they could do was hope that someone would intervene, as they were paralyzed in a trance. In short time, intervention came, with Perkring calling out for everyone to come to Leste's aid as he stumbled into an opening, spotting two more hooded Kenku. This quickly turned into an abject horror for the feathered duo, as when Kino turned the corner, he unleashed a vermin tide upon them, dropping their concentration on the hypnotic spell, keeping Leste and Kaun at bay as well. The two tried their best fending off the hordes, unleashing more hypnotic illusions and erupting raw lightning at the menagerie, but the two were quickly succumbed by the unending plague of rats. Wanting answers, Leste bound them up in the well-used manacles in the area prior, and Perkring worked his magic finding out what they were doing and why. The only thing he confirmed was that, for some undisclosed reason, the other Kenku felt they had no choice in what they did. With the Kenku having no desire to disclose any more information, and Leste having little pity in the excuse, she knocked the Kenku unconscious, and yet again the menagerie pressed on deeper for more answers. In a newly found opening full of stalactites and the smell of water, Perkring found something especially strange to him. 29 hatched Kenku eggs were strewn across the floor, eggs that looked uniquely like his own. He put aside the unsettling sight and instead focused on the forked path ahead of him. Rather than split up, this time the group proceeded forward, hearing both running water and distant conversation between 3 voices further down the cave. Cautiously and quietly, the menagerie sneaked forward, trying to find where these voices were coming from, until out of nowhere, one of the stalagmites turned and lunged at Leste. Caught off guard, the fighting immediately got loud, and the voices further down the cave got more panicked, and a 4th voice screamed out to the party not to trust them. But it was abruptly silenced as a thud was heard in the same direction as the voice. Confident in the party's ability to handle the monsters before them, Leste rushed ahead atop Kaun, trying to find any signs of the people who disappeared. They soared past even more of the cave monsters and found 3 Kenku ready to fight. Past them, much deeper into the cave, she saw a light, with people being held captive in cages. With disdain on her mind, she ignored the Kenku before her and rushed past them as well, now dead set on protecting the victims. Only 1 Kenku was present to guard the cages, and all he managed to do was lock doors, trying to stop Leste from advancing, but she was far too determined and busted down each lock until she was towering over him in a cage he locked himself in a vain attempt to stop her. Back to the rest of the menagerie, with a terrifying efficiency, they tore through the monsters of the cave with Keynote's rats leading the charge. Eventually, they encountered the 3 Kenku before catching up to Leste, and the tide of battle consumed these Kenkus as well. As Leste searched the now unconscious Kenku for a key, the rest of the menagerie approached, taking in the sight of 8 terrified captives in cages and manacles, alongside what looked like regularly used torture equipment. Not realizing Leste found a key, Perkring immediately got to picking locks and freeing captives, while Leste was far too terrified trying to get answers. She asked if anyone knew what was happening or why, and a labored voice spoke up from behind her. The Triton introduced herself as Dalen Reeds and explained how she had been there the longest, finding that compliance kept her alive, but still scarred. Her newest blemish being earned by trying to warn the party of the Kenku. She explained that they were here because their voices were desired. They were being told to read books so the Kenku could mimic them, in a way getting their own voices. This was being orchestrated by 2, Ilfana, a white Kenku with blue eyes, and Korik, a black one with red eyes. This description didn't match up with anyone the party had met yet, and Leste was frightened by this fact. Having to protect 8 more people alongside take on 2 more filled her with dread. At first, Leste tried to convince everyone to stay put. That way, once Ilfana and Korik were dealt with, they could leave together properly protected. That was not a popular recommendation to the captives who had been down here for months, but even amongst the party it was uncomfortable. Everyone else talked her down, convincing her that the cave had been cleared except for 1 path deeper down, likely where the 2 were held up. Especially with the guards on their way, they could quickly escort them out of this section of the cave, then pursue the final 2 with little concern of non-combatants getting involved. Anxiously, despite her concerns, Leste agreed. To make sure the unconscious Kenku wouldn't interfere, she bound them to the same manacles they held their captors in, then escorted the escapees further out of the cave. Once they were a safe distance away, the menagerie turned around and continued to the final unexplored cavern, finding a set of double doors. Without hesitation, they rushed inside, where walls of magic stood between them, Ilfana, and Korik. Before anyone had the time to take in the room, Korik unleashed a fireball at the party's feet. In an instant, everyone was consumed by flame, but Sonora's tome lit up in a vibrant blue, tempering the damage as a standoff began. Korik was quick to threaten the party with more magics, but told them if they left the way they came, the 2 of them would not pursue. Shortly after this, Ilfana chimed up, realizing a Kenku child stood amongst the menagerie, one that was too similar to her own children to not be her own missing child. In this standoff, the menagerie took in the room and began to plan. Past the two kinku were a clutch of eggs also shielded. If something went wrong, those needed to be protected first. Present also was a rune circle on the floor, likely for some grand spell, but for what exactly was unknown. Corroborating this, collections of tomes and tables for magic study adorned the room. Finally, the walls here seemed sturdy except for two. These sections were a collection of rocks stacked on top of each other, with water pooling at the base, likely a way out, or worse, a way to collapse the cave. Without a word, Perkring set a plan in motion. Without Ilfana or Korik noticing, he handed off the magic-dampening manacles he made to Leste, then approached Ilfana. Through magical deception and enchantment, he approached his supposed mother as an innocent child looking for a caretaker. He tried convincing her that he just wanted a hug now that he finally saw his biological mother, and all she needed to do was take down the barrier between them. For just an instant, Ilfana acted not like herself. She was convinced without a shadow of a doubt Perkring was her child and that he needed protection. She let down the barrier and let Perkring approach as she realized in horror what she did. Korik was taken aback by this so much he didn't react when Leste atop Kaun pounced in their direction, placing the manacles on him in an instant. In a much worse situation, the two kinku still did not count themselves out, and replied with righteous magic fury. The two did everything in their power to cast down the menagerie, bathing them in magical flame and horrifying lightning. Every time the duo got their intruders closer to death, though, Sonora intervened, having her tome bathe in a blue light and mitigate the damage her menagerie took. Eventually, Ilfana made the call and accepted her inevitable defeat at the sight of Korik's near death. She yelled at him that it was time to leave, and the two bathed the rune on the floor in magic. The all-too-familiar rumbling of teleportation magic began to shake the room alongside the rock walls, expediting their escape while condemning the caves to flood. Right before the two finished casting their spell, Maka uttered a word of radiance, setting Korik's soul to rest as Ilfana teleported to a location unknown, screaming into rhyme at her partner's death. Once the teleport concluded, the rock walls completely failed and water started flooding the room. Immediately, Leste called for the rest of the menagerie to run, and most did just that. Joker and Sonora bolted out of the room before Kino had an opportunity to summon giant eagles for them to escape on, so he and Maka followed atop the birds, picking them up on their way out. Perkring, however, did not heed Leste's words. Too concerned about the clutch of eggs in the corner, quickly and carefully he placed them in his bag and hopped inside it, knowing Kaun would pick it up. While this choice terrified Leste, she quickly got to work throwing Korik's body inside Kaun's incubation bag, followed by any book she saw in the room. She cared little about any arcane knowledge that could be gleaned from these tomes. All she wanted were answers on why they chose to do this, and how Ilfana could be tracked down. After mere seconds, the room was already flooded, making movement difficult, so Kaun grabbed Perkring in his bag, Leste mounted him, and the two flew off. They soared behind the rest of the menagerie, but were outpacing the water filling up the cave. As they began their ascension, mentally, Leste hesitated, lost in horror at the kinku she bound to the cave walls. Yes, they were monsters for what they had done, but she wanted justice. Drowning and having their sins forgotten was not that. As she got closer to the entrance, she made sure to unbind the kinku she could save, ensuring they got their proper sentencing, but her mind was still stuck on those she drowned. Outside, now collected and out of danger, Maka looked everyone over. No one was looking particularly well, but overall were in stable condition, except for Sonora, who was exhausted, laying on the ground. Performing a rapid examination, she realized Sonora's illness was now consuming her soul. Sonora admitted she did things in those caves she definitely shouldn't have, but to her, it was worth it to make sure everyone was safe. Considering her current condition, she admitted it was time to take a break from adventuring. No one objected. It was the right call to make. but Leste had something for her. She reached into Kaun's bag, then placed a shard of Kaun's egg gently on her chest, telling her to return it once she came back to her menagerie. Sonora didn't know what she would do next, but she knew Belmar was there for her. Contacting her with a magical feather for a pickup, Belmar responded immediately, organizing a lift for her. The message didn't end there, though. She had another lead for Maybe It's Menagerie, as the Yazoo apparently were on the frozen wastes above Hala, finding the lost city of Yerevan. With that, let us continue.